Illusory Superiority. There's a disturbing truth about human nature that shows up in every prison, every boardroom, and every mirror you've ever looked into. You think you're better than you actually are. Right now, you're mentally placing yourself above most people watching this, and likely believe you're the exception to every other disturbing truth we're about to cover, which only serves to prove the point. Psychologists surveyed prison inmates convicted of violent crimes and asked them to rate their own honesty, compassion, and moral character compared to the average person. These convicted criminals rated themselves as more honest, more trustworthy, and more morally upstanding than people who'd never committed a crime. They weren't lying to the researchers. They genuinely believed it. This phenomenon is called illusory superiority, and the research shows you're doing it too. 93% of American drivers believe they're better than average behind the wheel. 94% of college professors rate themselves as above-average teachers compared to their colleagues, and 65% of people rate themselves as more intelligent than average, which is mathematically impossible. The pattern repeats across every domain researchers test. People genuinely believe they're better than most everyone else. The effect appears strongest in areas where performance is hardest to measure objectively. You can't easily quantify whether you're a good person, a skilled communicator, or someone with good judgment, so your brain fills in the gaps with a version that flatters you. When researchers ask people to rate concrete, measurable skills where feedback is clear, the effect shrinks. But for traits like intelligence, morality, and competence, where you control the narrative and rarely get corrected, illusory superiority runs unchecked. Even now, part of your brain is cataloging all the ways you're different from everyone this research describes, which is exactly what makes you the same. The Bystander Effect. 38 people watched Kitty Genovese get stabbed to death outside her apartment building in 1964, and not one of them called the police until it was too late. You'd like to think you're different, that you'd be the one to act, but the research says otherwise. The more people around you when something terrible happens, the less likely you are to do anything about it. John Darley and Bib Latane wanted to understand what happened that night. They designed an experiment where participants filled out surveys in a room when smoke started pouring in through a vent. When they were alone, 75% reported it within 2 minutes. With 2 other people present, only 38% said anything. Most just sat quietly while smoke filled the room thick enough to make them cough. Your brain runs a calculation when something goes wrong. If you're alone, responsibility falls on you. When others are present, that responsibility diffuses across everyone. And since their brains are running the same equation, nobody acts. You're not deciding to ignore the emergency. You're waiting for someone else to confirm it's serious enough to warrant breaking social norms, and they're waiting for the same confirmation from you. This doesn't just apply to emergencies. The same mechanism stops you from confronting unethical behavior at work, intervening when someone's being harassed, or helping someone who's clearly struggling when a crowd is watching. More witnesses means less action, because everyone assumes someone else will handle it. The person who needed help doesn't get it, and everyone walks away thinking somebody else stepped in. The Authority Effect. A man in a lab coat told ordinary people to electrocute a stranger, and an overwhelming majority of them did it. They heard screaming. They saw the victim begging them to stop, and they kept going anyway because someone with a clipboard said the experiment required it. Stanley Milgram's 1961 study is one of the most disturbing experiments ever conducted. Participants thought they were testing how punishment affects learning. They sat at a shock generator with switches ranging from 15 to 450 volts, labeled Danger, Severe Shock. Every wrong answer from the learner in the room next to them meant increasing the voltage. The learner was an actor who wasn't actually being shocked, but participants didn't know that. At 150 volts, he demanded release. At 300 volts, he screamed and went silent. Participants just kept following instructions. Before running the study, Milgram surveyed psychiatrists who predicted less than 1% of people would go to maximum voltage. They were catastrophically wrong. 65% administered the full 450 volts, continuing even after the learner stopped responding. When participants hesitated, the experimenter used 4 scripted prompts. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue, and you have no other choice. You must go on. That's all it took. No threats, no force, no intimidation. A calm voice and perceived legitimacy overrode moral objections and kept people administering what they believed were potentially lethal shocks to someone who'd done nothing wrong. The participants weren't sadists. They were ordinary people who deferred to authority when it conflicted with their conscience, and authority won every time. Schadenfreude. 4-year-olds will pay money to watch a puppet they don't like get hit with a stick. By the time you're an adult, you've just learned to hide it better, scrolling through someone's public breakdown or career collapse with a smile you'd never admit to anyone. Your brain rewards you for watching enemies fail. Brain imaging shows that when you see someone you dislike suffer, your ventral striatum lights up, the same region activated by chocolate, money, and sex. Watching rivals lose produces measurable chemical pleasure. You're not a monster for feeling it, you're just human, and humans evolved in environments where competitors failing meant better survival odds for you. The effect intensifies with envy. Someone has what you want, and their failure feels satisfying because it closes the gap between you. Social media weaponizes this by flooding you with highlight reels of people apparently doing better, creating resentment you didn't know existed. When one of those people stumbles, you feel relief disguised as concern, scrolling just a little slower through their bad news than you do through everything else. Studies with young children show this isn't learned behavior, it's hardwired. Given the choice between rewarding good puppets or watching bad puppets get punished, kids consistently paid to watch suffering. They don't need to be taught Schadenfreude. They come equipped with it, and so do you. The Lucifer Effect. Stanford University took psychologically healthy college students, flipped a coin to decide who'd be a guard and who'd be a prisoner, then watched the guards turn into sadists within 48 hours. The experiment was supposed to last 2 weeks. They had to shut it down after 6 days because the abuse got so bad that even the researchers couldn't justify letting it continue. The basement of Stanford's psychology building got converted into a mock prison in 1971. Student guards received uniforms, batons, and mirrored sunglasses. Student prisoners were arrested at their actual homes, booked, and given numbers instead of names. Within 24 hours, guards were forcing middle-of-the-night counts, demanding push-ups, and denying bathroom access. Day 2 brought a prisoner rebellion. Guards responded by stripping them, removing beds, and locking ringleaders in solitary confinement. By day 3, one prisoner had a breakdown severe enough to require release. Guards invented degrading punishments without prompting, forcing prisoners to clean toilets with bare hands, simulate sexual acts, and hold stress positions for hours. Most guards described themselves as pacifists before the study started, but the structure gave them power, anonymity, and implicit permission. That combination corrupted normal students faster than anyone predicted it would. The takeaway wasn't that bad people do bad things. It's that situational power corrupts anyone when accountability disappears, and the people you control have been stripped of their humanity. The question isn't whether you'd abuse power. It's how long you'd last before you did. Dehumanization. When researchers scanned people's brains while showing them images of homeless individuals, the part of the brain that recognizes other humans as people barely lit up at all. Their brains process them the same way it does objects. You're doing this right now without realizing it, automatically categorizing entire groups of people as less than you. The medial prefrontal cortex handles social cognition, thinking about other people's thoughts, feelings, and intentions. When you view images of homeless people or drug addicts, activity in that region drops significantly compared to when you see individuals from your same social class. Reduced activation means you're not processing them as fully human. They register as scenery, not people worthy of a second thought. This happens automatically. You don't choose to dehumanize someone. Your brain shortcuts cognitive resources by deprioritizing people your culture already labeled as less valuable, including homeless people, addicts, and prisoners. The same mechanism enabled ordinary Germans to participate in genocide in World War II. You see them, but your brain doesn't grant them the same mental processing it gives people in your own group, so their suffering doesn't register with equivalent weight. Dehumanization makes cruelty effortless because empathy requires recognizing someone as human first. Skip that step, and you can walk past suffering without emotional cost. You tell yourself it's not your problem, or they made bad choices, but the actual reason is your brain didn't flag them as worth helping in the first place. The Asch Effect. Which line is longer, the one on the left or the one on the right? It's obvious. A child could answer it. But if everyone else in the room confidently says the wrong answer, there's a 75% chance you'll agree with them, even though your eyes are telling you they're lying. Solomon Asch's 1950s experiments placed one real participant in a room with actors posing as other participants. Everyone viewed a line and matched it to one of 3 comparison lines. The correct answer was unambiguous. One line clearly matched, while the other 2 obviously didn't. The actors answered first, and on critical trials, they unanimously chose the wrong line. Asch wanted to see if the real participant would trust their perception or conform. 75% conformed at least once. They could see the right answer, but chose the wrong one to avoid standing out. Interviews afterward revealed most knew the group was wrong, but didn't want to cause conflict or appear different. Some genuinely doubted their own perception after hearing everyone else disagree with what their eyes clearly showed them. You do this constantly. You adjust opinions, behaviors, and preferences to match surrounding people. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny. You nod along with positions you reject. You adopt group consensus on politics, morality, and taste because disagreeing feels socially dangerous. Being the only dissenting voice is enough to make you deny what you know is the truth. Tribalism. Your brain will turn strangers into enemies based on nothing more than what color shirt they're wearing. It doesn't need real conflict, shared history, or actual differences. It just needs 2 categories, and suddenly you're discriminating against people you've never met for reasons that don't actually exist. Research finds this in children as young as 5. When shown pictures of kids from different places, they consistently rate their own city's kids as smarter and kinder, despite never having met any of them. This isn't learned behavior. Their brain automatically categorizes the world into us versus them. Henry Tajfel proved adults do the same thing. In experiments from the 1970s, he assigned people to groups based on which paintings they preferred, then let them distribute resources. Participants consistently gave more to people in their own group, even though membership had been determined 60 seconds earlier by arbitrary preference. In-group bias doesn't just make you favor similar people, it makes you view outsiders as less trustworthy, less intelligent, and less deserving of empathy. You excuse bad behavior from your group while condemning identical actions from outsiders. You interpret ambiguous behavior as hostile when it comes from them, but benign when it comes from your side. This operates without conscious awareness, but shapes hiring decisions, friendships, political beliefs, and whether you stop to help someone in distress. Confirmation bias. Show someone evidence that contradicts what they already believe, and they don't change their mind. They double down. The more proof you give them that they're wrong, the more convinced they become that they're right. Because your brain wasn't built to find truth, it was built to protect the version of reality you already have. Your brain doesn't evaluate evidence neutrally. It actively hunts for information supporting what you already think, and dismisses or distorts information challenging it. Read an article aligning with your worldview, and you accept it as credible. Read one contradicting it, and you scrutinize methodology, question sources, and find reasons to reject it. Both articles could be equally rigorous, but your brain treats them completely differently based solely on whether they confirm or threaten existing beliefs. Peter Wason discovered this in 1960 with a card task that asked people to test a rule. Most selected only cards that confirmed the rule and ignored cards that could disprove it. When presented with disconfirming evidence, they dismissed it or twisted the interpretation to preserve what they already believed. Decades of research since then have shown this dominates how people process information across every context tested. Identity-linked beliefs make this worse. When being right is part of who you are, contradictory evidence doesn't just challenge an idea, it challenges your sense of self. So instead of changing your mind when you're wrong, you entrench further, seek new evidence supporting your position, and convince yourself everyone who disagrees is misinformed. You're accusing them of exactly what you're doing, and confirmation bias is how you got there without ever being aware. Just world hypothesis. When something terrible happens to someone else, your first instinct isn't sympathy, it's to figure out what they did wrong. Because if bad things only happen to people who deserve them, then you're safe as long as you follow the rules. That's a comforting lie, and your brain would rather believe it than admit the universe is random and you're just as vulnerable as everyone else. Melvin Lerner developed the just world hypothesis after watching how people reacted to innocent suffering. He showed participants someone receiving undeserved electric shocks. Instead of sympathy, observers derogated the victim, rating them less intelligent, less likable, and more deserving of punishment. The more innocent the suffering, the harsher the judgment, because acknowledging that bad things happen randomly threatens your sense of control. Victim blaming is everywhere. Assault survivors get asked about clothing they were wearing or why they were alone. Poor people get blamed for not working hard enough. Cancer patients get interrogated about diet and lifestyle choices. The questions aren't designed to help. They're designed to create psychological distance by identifying reasons their suffering wouldn't apply to you. If they caused it through bad decisions, you can avoid the same fate by making better ones. Accepting that terrible things happen to people who did nothing wrong is psychologically unbearable because it means you're never truly safe. So your brain constructs narratives where victims are responsible, protecting your belief in fairness while abandoning people who need empathy most. You're not trying to be cruel. You're trying to manage the terror of living in a world where randomness can destroy you, regardless of how carefully you live. Fundamental attribution error. When you cut someone off in traffic, it's because you're late and the situation forced your hand. When someone cuts you off, it's because they're a bonehead who shouldn't have a license. Same behavior, completely different explanation, depending on who's doing it. Lee Ross identified this in 1977 and called it the fundamental attribution error. Explaining your own behavior, you cite circumstances such as stress, time pressure, and external constraints beyond your control. Explaining someone else's behavior, you cite character traits like laziness, stupidity, selfishness, or moral failure. You assume context shapes your actions, while everyone else's actions reveal who they truly are. The asymmetry is extreme. You snap at someone because you're exhausted. Someone snaps at you because they're rude. You miss a deadline due to unrealistic expectations. Someone else misses one because they're unreliable. You grant yourself endless understanding while applying impossibly harsh standards to others, genuinely believing both assessments are accurate and fair. This creates a world where you're constantly misunderstood and everyone else fails basic decency. You assume others see the situational factors constraining you, but they don't. They're running the same error in reverse, attributing your behavior to your character while excusing their own. Solitude aversion. Researchers ask people to sit alone in a room with their thoughts for 15 minutes. No phone, no distractions, just themselves. 67% of men and 25% of women chose to shock themselves instead. You'd rather experience physical pain than spend a quarter of an hour alone inside your own head. The participants had already experienced the shock and rated it unpleasant enough they'd pay money to avoid it. They knew it hurt, but when they sat in an empty room with a button that would deliver that same painful shock and were given nothing else to do for 15 minutes, most men and a quarter of women pressed it anyway. One participant shocked himself 190 times rather than sit quietly with his thoughts. The discomfort isn't boredom. Being alone with your thoughts forces confrontation with things you've been avoiding. Regrets, anxieties, unresolved conflicts, and the gap between who you are and who you want to be. Your brain will seek physical pain as distraction rather than face that. You're not running from silence. You're running from yourself, and you'll tolerate shocking amounts of discomfort to keep that from happening. This explains compulsive phone checking, binge watching, and filling every quiet moment with noise. Stillness is intolerable because it removes the distractions keeping uncomfortable thoughts suppressed. You claim you're too busy for introspection, but the truth is, you're terrified of what you'd discover if you stopped moving long enough to actually look. The avoidance doesn't make those thoughts disappear, it just ensures you never process them, so they keep surfacing as anxiety, irritability, and constant low-level dissatisfaction you can't quite name or fix. You watch this hoping you'd be the exception to everything described. You're not, and neither is anyone else. You can't fix human nature, but knowing these patterns exist gives you a shot at catching them before they make your decisions for you.